All right. Great to see everybody here today. Please be seated if you're standing. And I'd like to welcome everybody here and everyone that's with us on the internet. I'd like to welcome you to another class of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification course. We're here today, as well as every week, we're here learning how to become teachers of the Peaceful Solution. In everything that we do, of course, our actions are an example, and we teach by our actions too. But we're looking at, of course, the main curriculum of the Peaceful Solution, and we're also discussing things that we've seen take place. Many of us have been teaching out there for some time in prisons and municipalities, government offices, individual, civic centers. I mean, you name it, we've pretty much been there, many of us. And so we try to share some of those experiences with you from time to time and share with you what we've seen and what we've been through, and, since we've been learning and practicing the Peaceful Solution. So hopefully some of that stuff hits home and it makes sense to everybody. So that's what we hope for. Tonight we're going to be, and let me just say first, the next class, I want to make sure I mention it beforehand too, but the next class after tonight will be on the 24th, on December 24th at 5:30 p.m., December 24th at 5:30 p.m. For those of you that can join us, it'll be great. Chris will be teaching the class. I think Chris is the next teacher up. So anyway, so tonight we're in the responsibility unit, and we will be going to Lesson Plan 2, page D. Lesson Plan 2, page D. And up at the very top in procedure number 3, it says to tell students that the deciding factor between a responsible and an irresponsible person is self-control. Refer students to the section S is for self-control found on pages 23 and 24, and tell students that when they practice self-control, they can stop and think about the consequences of their actions so that they can make responsible choices. Assign the critical thinking exercise on page 24 as homework. And as you might know by now, a lot of what all the teachers have been talking about when we delve into a certain subject, it is considered critical thinking. We are digging into it, looking at it, discussing the hows and the how-nots and the whys and why-nots and so forth of what has occurred. And in hopes of getting us to think about things before we do them and practice this self-control that is so very important. The deciding factor between a responsible and irresponsible person is self-control. If you don't have self-control, you can't do anything. You can't be responsible, you can't show respect, you can't show acceptance, you can't, it just doesn't work. You have to have self-control. Now, are you going to use it all the time? Probably not at first. It takes a lot of getting used to, and we all mess up a little bit every now and then. So just remember that we're practicing the Peaceful Solution. We're learning it and practicing it, making it become muscle memory, making it become habit, so that we do this all the time. Okay? That it's not such a big deal. When we first start learning the Peaceful Solution, and some of the concepts hit us, and we're like, man, it sounds so simple. Yet it's not as simple as we find out as we go along, because things just hit you, and then you look back and think, man, I should have done that differently. I should have practiced some self-control. I should have shut my mouth. I shouldn't have yelled at that person, or whatever the case might be. I shouldn't have stole that thing, whatever it is. We need to really stop and think and use this self-control. And it's tough at first, but it becomes easier as we go along. Don't think you're not going to make mistakes and some bad choices along the way. Yeah, you are, even if you've been practicing for a long time. But remember, you are practicing, okay? So anyway, let's go ahead and turn over to, oh, by the way, it says at the bottom there, assign the critical thinking exercise on page 24 as homework. And so we'll take a look at it real quick, but you can do it as homework too. We're not going to actually do the, you're not going to write it down, turn it in or anything. So you'll do that as homework, but we'll just read over it too. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn over to page 23. Now, for those of you that were with us in the last class, you know we did do the pop quiz, and there were a couple there that kind of stood out to me. Anyway, at the top of the page on 23, it says, how did you do? Any question you answered A or B indicates that you are not being responsible in those areas. Got it? Questions that you answered C show that you are demonstrating responsibility in those areas. And remember, a responsible character means being responsible in all areas. You can't be considered a responsible person just because you're responsible in one thing. You have to be responsible in all areas to be truly a responsible person, to have responsible character. So if you got all C answers, then way to go. You're well on your way to becoming a responsible person. You recognize the value of completing your duties. And remember, on page 6, I think it is, in the character unit, you can learn more about values and how you have a value system. The values are extremely important to you, and that value system is part of the base of how you make all your decisions. It's what you value, what's important to you. So you recognize that completing your duties is important to you. You recognize the value of completing your duties as you have been instructed and making moral choices, moral, the right way. You want to do things the right way according to the peaceful solution. What we're learning, that great moral character that we're all, building, developing. So you want to make those moral choices that show respect not only for yourself, but for others also. Yes, you don't want to disrespect yourself just as you don't want to disrespect others. And if you haven't learned how to love yourself and respect yourself, and I don't mean in an arrogant way, I'm talking about learning to do things properly for yourself. That's great health-wise. It's great for your mind and your body, and so you can make proper choices, and so that you can actually show respect for others too. Well, when you recognize that, just keep up the great work. Keep on going. And remember, there are people that are responsible in some areas. I mean, you can see it. You might see a coworker or something that, not to exclude ourselves, but you might see a coworker or someone that, man, they are so responsible in some area. They're at work on time, just Johnny on the spot, or early, if you will. And they do everything seems just right, and then you see them one day out doing something crazy that's harmful for them and other people, or take some risk-taking behavior or something, or not being responsible in being home on time even. Might be responsible in one area of their life, but not in another area of their life, So we want to be responsible in all areas. Yes, even washing the dishes and cleaning the kitchen. That would be true. All right. So S is for self-control. Now, there are many factors that affect whether or not we choose to develop a responsible character. One of them is called, what is it? Self-control, right? So let's look at the little cartoon there. Great job. There's Mom talking to her son, it would seem. Great job. You got all your homework done. Now let's see how you did with cleaning your room. So see, he was responsible in getting his homework done. And now we're going to check out the room. And look at the little thought bubble there over his head. Uh-oh. You ever been in that position? Yeah. Well, so she opens the door, and here comes everything falling out. He's stuffed everything. It looks like in the closet or something. I don't know. But everything just comes pouring out. Well, at least I did a great job on my homework, so. But that's not really any consolation. Yeah, he did a great job on his homework, but You should be trying to practice being responsible in all areas. Now, some people think as long as it's out of sight and out of mind, that it's okay, that you can pile stuff in a closet or in another room or something like that and get by with it. You know, and I guess if you got a big house and you want to use one of the rooms as storage or something, that's all fine, you know. But if your assigned area is like this young man, a room, then you would want to be responsible for keeping it clean and orderly for yourself, and also keeping it clean and orderly because that's what you've been assigned to do by your authority, you know, your mom, your dad, etc. Self-control enables you to control thoughts. Now, this part of it, you know, self-control enables you to control thoughts, decisions, and behavior by weighing the consequences of your actions, then making a choice to be accountable and respectful toward others and yourself. So this is some of that critical thinking, too, that we're talking about. By weighing the consequences of a possible action that you might be fixing to take, then making a choice to be accountable and respectful towards others and yourself. And, you know, the newer you are in practicing the peaceful solution, the more you really have to take hold of this step right here, because you're learning. You know, you don't have a lot of automatic muscle memory, if you will, on practicing this self-control. So self-control is so important that it's the foundation of a positive character. And because developing all other positive character traits, such as compassion, respect, and responsibility, rest upon our ability to control our thoughts and make wise decisions. So just a brief thing going over that, you know. And now let's go to page 24 and continue on there. So by practicing self-control, you can avoid making choices that you will regret or can cause harm to yourself or others. And so these choices, this is what we have to keep in mind. You know what places us above all the other creatures on the earth? We have the ability to make choices, to think about the things that we want to do and make a choice. Now, you might say, okay, well, a deer out in the woods has a choice on whether they're going to the right or left. Well, you know, I guess they do. They hear a noise over here and they decide to go off over this way. But they don't have the ability to make choices like we do on, you know, are we going to eat Pop-Tart for breakfast, or are we going to eat egg and toast? You know, what is it? You know, they're not going to make that choice. They're not going to make choices on their moral character. You know, they eat what they're assigned to eat. They eat what's in their DNA, you know. That's what they do. But we can make all kinds of choices. If we want to go eat dirt, we can. If we want to drink a gallon of gasoline, we can, you know. But I don't recommend it, and that's, you know, a very out there example. But I'm just saying, you can choose to do any of those things. It might not be the right thing, but that's what we're trying to learn to do, is to be able to group our thoughts and our actions into a pattern of you know, using the foundation of self-control, building that pattern of doing everything the right way as much as we can. The right way being that doesn't hurt you or anybody else or the environment or anybody's property. So to develop this self-control, you must stop before acting, think about the right thing to do, decide the best way to handle the situation. And, you know, some situations are not going to be, when you stop and start thinking about it, it might be something that you don't handle right then and there. Some things can be handled right then and there, immediate responses, immediate choices, but not all have to be that way. If you've got a tough situation and you want to get some advice on how to handle it, or think about it overnight, or what have you, hey, you have that ability to stop and think and decide how you're going to proceed to do it the right way. So decide the best way to handle the situation and the consequences or rewards that can result from the decision that you make. Let me see here. That's something I might want to share. All right. Now, you can write this down, but page 108 of your self-control book, page 108, this is talking a little bit about self-control. And since we're talking about it and how important it is, I thought I'd include this in. But page 108 of your self-control book says, think about it. Without self-control, anger can quickly turn to rage. Could you hand me that sign? Without self-control, anger can quickly turn to rage. Now, anger is a secondary emotion, and we all get angry sometimes. Now, anger doesn't mean that you have to get all fired up and throw things at people and all that stuff, and you don't have to let it carry over and turn into rage. It just means that you don't agree with something that's taking place. Okay? You don't agree with something that's taking place, and it's, making you feel a little bit funky, you don't agree with it, all right? So you're getting angry. Don't let it go the next stage to rage. An enraged person can cause harm to you and to others. However, if you can maintain your composure and are willing to use self-control to communicate and interact in positive ways, a peaceful solution can be found. So being angry or disagreeing with someone or something taking place does not give you the right to communicate in a disrespectful way with somebody. You're already getting to that rage point if you do. Yeah, you might not be throwing things, screaming and cussing and everything, but you're getting there. So now's the time to kick back a little bit, slow down, think about what you're doing, before it gets to that point. So then be able to interact in positive ways that a peaceful solution can be found, okay? And I'm going to continue on this page because putting it all together. Keep in mind that you will need self-control to respond appropriately in a crisis situation. Here's how you would put the STOP acronym to work. So get that? Responding appropriately in a crisis situation. Now, not everything might be quite a crisis, but there are things that come up on a daily basis that you could label crisis situation. So we want to stop and that acknowledge that you're in a situation. I'm going to hold this up for a minute. Everybody see that? Stop, think, options, proceed with the right choice. Just remember that stop sign, and remember the S for stop, the T for think, the O for options, and the P for proceed, okay? And we're going to continue on right here. So you stop and you acknowledge, first of all, that you're in a situation that could become a crisis. You have to first acknowledge that there's a problem, okay? Acknowledge it. Acknowledge you're in a situation that could become a crisis. The outcome might be uncertain, but it's likely to be negative if you respond with anger to somebody. Then we want to go to the next letter, think. Think and consider that the individual or individuals are angry or enraged and could cause harm to you or others. You got to know who you're dealing with. Depending on who you're dealing with, you might handle things differently than, like if you're dealing with someone that is kind of laid back and calm, but y'all have a little bit of a difference going on here, and you know that you can talk to the person, that the communication is probably going to be respectful both ways. But if you don't really know the person that there's a disagreement with or something, or you know that person is easily angered and enraged, you might want to step back and figure out another way to take care of things. They might not be willing to talk about anything at that point. You might have to just cut it off and go and come back another day or get someone else to help you with it. So consider that the individual or individuals are angry or enraged and could cause harm to you or others. Now, quickly turn, if you had your self-control book, but you can write this down, page 106. Here's a suggestion for when you are in a conflict where someone is on the brink of losing self-control. It is up to you. Get that? It's up to you. It's really not up to them if they haven't been taught the peaceful solution. They're not the ones that need to, they need to practice self-control, but they hadn't been taught. So you're the one that's being taught. You're the one wanting to become a teacher of the peaceful solution or already teaching the peaceful solution. And so what you're fixing to do with that individual is going to actually teach the right way if you handle it right, okay? So when you're in a conflict where someone is on the brink of losing control, it's up to you not to allow their behavior to influence the way you respond. Did you get that? Don't allow them to influence you. You know how many times I've heard, yeah, but he called me a name. Well, that means you allowed the person to influence the way you were going to conduct yourself. Get it? Or, yeah, but he stole $5 from me, or 500, or what have you. Again, it's up to you not to allow their behavior to influence the way that you respond. You have no excuse to turn this into something worse than what it is. That person actually has an excuse. They haven't been taught the peaceful solution, possibly. They have an excuse. You don't. You don't have one. Think about that a little bit. When that thought comes that, well, he yelled at me, well, he pushed me, well, he stepped on my toe, well, he didn't pay me, or, well, he threw something at me, or spit at me, or, he scratched my car. He drove my car and didn't put the key back, or he ran all the gas out of my car. You name it. Come up with anything you want to come up with, and it doesn't matter. Don't allow their behavior to influence your behavior, okay? That's the key right there. And it can be very, very difficult to do. Remember, the likelihood is that some of your anger triggers, remember there are these triggers that kind of tweak there a little bit. Someone says something to you just right, and maybe everything else you can just handle it very well, and you're cool and calm and laid back. Nothing can bug you. Let it all go off your back like water on a duck's back, But then here comes this guy, pulls that trigger or pushes that button, that trigger, and you just go off the handle. Don't be influenced by what they do. Don't be influenced by the way the AT&T operator talks to you on the phone. Don't be influenced by the answers they give you when you're trying to get a refund on something. Don't be influenced by how rude they are and you be rude too. Show the other way. And really you might find that you get what you want if you act right. So anyway, remember it can be difficult to do. Okay, so that's all we're going to say on that. We're going to go back over here and finish page 108 of your self-control. So that's considering that individual could be angry or enraged. Okay, so then options. You could even put the RESPOND acronym to work and remain calm and stay in control, evaluate the situation, and determine the right words to say. In this situation where active listening is extremely important too. And is this a situation where this active listening could be helpful at all? Active listening, okay? So remember, we're talking about the STOP acronym for a minute here. We're talking about how important self-control is. Let me get that where you can see it right there, okay? So let's flip on over there on page 95 in your self-control book if you were to have it, or you could write this down so you could look at it. Tips for active listening. So while this person is possibly influencing you a little bit with the way they're doing things, reflect on what you think that speaker is feeling. And this can be done by using statements such as it sounds like, it seems like, etc., rather than saying, well, you did this, you did that, Do not interrupt or change the topic until you are sure the other person is finished speaking. If somebody's a little irate and you start interrupting them, that's only going to make things worse. Even if they're not irate and you interrupt them, it can start causing a little something there. And I can tell you that with cell phones, that's so easy to do without even realize you're doing it, There's a little pause or something, and you think the person is finished, and they're not finished, and then they get upset because you interrupted them, and you're like, well, I didn't know. I thought you were done. I'm sorry, Or they interrupt you, and you weren't through talking. Then how are you going to handle it? Keep that in mind. So don't interrupt. And then also when you're actively listening, use an appropriate amount of eye contact. And so you don't want to stare them down or glare at them with a frown on your face, but you do want to make eye contact, so you let them know you're listening to what they're saying, okay? So that's just some tips for that active listening. All right, so so the question is, when considering your options, is this a situation where active listening would be helpful? Well, the answer is yes, I think. Remember to stay objective, Someone could intentionally try to provoke you into a fight. Be willing to be humble, apologize, and walk away if it's appropriate to do so. Man, that's hard to do when someone's getting on you, you know, and being disrespectful, and especially if there's people around watching too, you know. You might have those thoughts, I got to stand up for myself. I'm not going to let him, you know, well, I'm not going to use that word, but so proceed. Then we go to proceed by making a decision to keep yourself and others safe, okay? In other words, proceed by making the right choice and not doing something that would hurt you, others, the environment, or property, you know, okay? So there we go. And then, so let's get on back over here. All right. Let me see if I can find where I was at here. Yeah, so, you know, of course, find the best way to handle the situation and think about the consequences and rewards that can result from the decision you make. Were you ever asked to do something by a parent, teacher, employer, something like that you didn't want to do? Think about it a minute. Were you? It's a real question. I guarantee you, everybody in here, I'm not asking you to raise your hands, but everybody in here would have to say yes. There is nobody that is exempt from that one. From the time you're a little child to the time you're an adult and working, or even a supervisor somewhere, or what have you, you know, whatever the case might be. Have you ever been asked to do something that you didn't really want to do? Yes, I'll answer it for you. The answer is yes. Well, how did you react? Did you think to yourself, well, they're not being fair. I did that job yesterday. Why don't you get so-and-so to do it? Or, you know, these thoughts start going through your mind. Remember, there's a thing called a trigger. Is this one of them? And then you got to control your thoughts. If you start having hot thoughts and you start thinking they're not being fair, and why don't they get him to do it? Oh, that's the teacher's pet. Oh, that's the boss's pet. Something like that. You know, you got all these things, negative things going through your head and thinking, this is dumb. Why do I have to do it? Well, once those thoughts went through your mind, how did you respond? Did you get upset, roll your eyes, refuse to obey, you know, talk back? A lot of talking back takes place, and you know, you might think you know how to do it better, you know. That goes through, I mean, really, that's some of the things that go through people's minds. And it's how you deal with it, you know. When you start having those kind of thoughts, realize that they're hot thoughts and you need to cool it down a little bit and think of something positive. This is where having that positive attitude instead of a negative attitude, that the optimistic attitude instead of the pessimistic attitude, this is where that comes into play. You're less likely to start thinking thoughts like this. But if you do, hey, you can go ahead and change it before actually doing something crazy. So did you ever consider that your parent, teacher, employer, whatever, has a right to ask you to complete a task? Do they have a right to do it? Yeah, they have a right to do it. You're employed. You get paid by somebody, and they have a job that they want you to do the way that they want you to do it. See? It doesn't matter that you think you might know another way. I was talking to a man, you know, he's on up in the years a little bit, but I was talking to him the other day, and we were talking about that a little bit, on how, you know, he was experienced in a certain area, and, you know, he knows that this other job that someone did could have been done better or in another way that would have been more beneficial for everybody involved. And so after talking a little bit, I said, yeah, but, you know, was it done the way the people were told to do it? Because he was actually talking about a job that was done recently, like it was some kind of a repair that had taken place. And with his knowledge and experience and everything, he knew that this could have been done differently, and in his opinion, in a way that it would have been better and would have lasted longer and might have even been cheaper to repair. And he wondered, you know, why they didn't do that. Why would they do this substandard work? You know, of course, in his opinion. And it might have been, who cares? As long as they did it the way the boss told them how to do it. Think about that for a minute. You might be the best painter out there, and that person might come up there and tell you, just paint that building and don't worry about using any primer on it. Oh, no, you don't need to wash the dust off. Don't worry about it. Just paint it. I just want it painted. Well, you might not know all the reasoning behind that, you know. He might know that they're fixing to tear that building down in a couple of weeks, but he wants it to look nice for a day or two, you know. I mean, really, you don't know all of it, and he doesn't have to explain it all to you if he's the employer, if he's the boss. You just need to do what he asks you to do. It's really that simple. Now, you can ask the question and say, you know, hey, you know, I was wondering, would it be okay to do it this way? And then the boss will let you know, well, no, I mean, if you could just do it the way I asked you, that'd be great. Or, you know what? That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. Why don't we do it the way you just suggested? You never know which way it's going to go. And it's okay for the boss to say no also. You know, we got to kind of get all that in our head. But did you consider that they have the right to ask you to complete a task? So if you refuse to obey, and, you know, doing it another way is refusal to obey, by the way. So as long as the request was not morally wrong, then you weren't practicing. If you refuse to obey, in other words, as long as what they were asking you to do wasn't morally wrong, they weren't asking you to go shoot somebody or go flatten somebody's tire because they don't like them or whatever. But if you refuse to obey in that respect, then you weren't practicing self-control if you just refused to obey, because you didn't stop to think about the right way to handle the situation or consider the consequences of your actions. Now, let me just add something there for a minute. You know, you might have an employer that doesn't care how you do it as long as the job gets done. He might not care if you do it the way he wanted it done, as long as it got done. You might come and say, hey, you know what? I got it done 30 minutes earlier because I did this right here. Is that okay? Oh, yeah, man, I just wanted to get the job done. We're great. You know, no problem. You might have a boss like that. You might have a teacher like that, a parent like that, something like that. And if so, that's all fine. They can take care of it how they want to take care of it, you know. But you might also have a boss that is training you to be a supervisor. And if you have a boss that's training you to be a supervisor and he wants you to understand the importance of doing it the way that he's asked you to do it, then how much more important would it be for you to do it the way you were asked to do it? So you can show that boss, that employer, that teacher, that parent, what have you, so that you can show that, yes, I am able to obey and do this the way it's supposed to be done and practice self-control and put my own wants and needs aside for a minute. Now you're showing that you can be that supervisor. Now you're showing that you can be the one that he wants to hand the company over to when he sells it. Now you're showing those things. You know, everybody that owns a company out there is looking for someone to someday take over, or they'll either sell the company and completely retire or what have you. But you'd be surprised how many owners out there would really like an employee, if they don't have a family member like a son or something that they're planning on handing it off to, if they want to see if they have, you know, over years they're watching to see if they get that special employee that goes over and above the call of duty, that is always obedient, that always does it the way asked to do it, or if they're given the option or the openness to do it however they want to do, that they do it and they do the job right and they get it done properly and so forth. They're looking for those people. They can hand that golden key over to you, or you're the one that's the owner of the company then. And a lot of times they make it very, very, very interesting for you, where you don't have to have a whole lot of money to do that, you know. Others want to just sell their company outright and be done with it, you know. But there's many people that are very pleased to be able to hand it over to someone else that they brought up in the company, and then turn it over and be there to help them some and see that they're doing a great job. Think about those things, you know. That's a real deal. All of you out there that are working for different people, think about these things, because it really is real. And it's amazing those that are out there that are willing to help the employees that they see doing a really great job and getting along with people and so forth. So anyway, that's just a little something added there. Okay, so see, that's thinking about when a situation comes like that, you can take that negative side, that pessimistic side, and you can be the one that says, oh, they're not fair and everything, and it's going to affect your actions from then on. you'll never be that employee that gets the golden key handed to him. But on the other hand, if you think about the rewards that could come from being that person that does it right all the time, and that there would be a possibility of something like that. But even if there wasn't, still the benefit of doing the job right and feeling great about yourself and how you did it right without taking shortcuts and everything else. You think about those rewards and consequences, and you stop and think, you know what, man, I just need to do it right the first time. Because if you don't think you have time to do it right the first time, you sure don't have time to do it wrong, because you're going to be doing it again. If you skirt it and you go and do it wrong, then you have to come back and do it again. How much time have you taken? Probably double the time. So just do it right the first time. Man, that goes a long ways. All right, so the bottom line is a lack of self-control leads to irresponsible choices. Remember, we're talking about responsibility, which then leads to negative consequences. If you think your boss is not being fair and why you have to do this, and I know more than he does, and roll your eyes, refuse to obey, and all that stuff, you're going to have some negative consequences come your way, because that's what you're asking for, because you're dishing out negativity, and that's really what can come your way. Just be aware of that. So the part there that's for homework for you to fill out, the critical thinking part. What are some of the consequences that could come from disrespecting and refusing to obey an authority figure? Well, I just gave you a bunch of them right there, but if you sit and think about it and write some of those things down, if you really use some critical thinking and really dig into it, you're going to find things that I didn't even come close to mentioning. You'll be looking at things in your life in the past and everything and think, man, if I would have done this differently back then, I wouldn't have got my house broke into, or I wouldn't have got my license taken away, or I wouldn't have failed school, or I wouldn't have, you could name so many different things. So while you're there thinking about this, chew on this. Page, let's see, we might need to go back and, yep. Interesting. What we need to do is go back and look at procedure number 4, because we looked at the critical thinking exercise, and now we're going on to page 25. But look at procedure number 4 on lesson plan 2, page D. It says, explain that to become responsible in all areas, we must become aware of our thoughts and how they affect our choices and actions. We must be aware of our thoughts and how they affect our choices and actions. Explain that because we sometimes make irresponsible choices when we're angry, we should be especially careful or angry. We should be especially careful of anger or angry, hostile, or violent thoughts. Have students complete the exercise on page 28 and discuss the scenario. Okay, so you'll notice there's a few pages missing in between there, right? It jumps from seeing page 24 there to page 28. Well, it doesn't mean that we just we forgot to tear those pages in between out of the book, 25, 26, and 27. It doesn't mean that we just left them in there just for fun. It's a real deal. They're important. Chew on this. So let's go ahead and look at page 25 on the way to page 28. Let's go ahead and look at page 25. Chew on this, okay? Every action, whether responsible or irresponsible, begins with a thought. And when we're looking at these lessons, I want to get a little note here, something I wrote a long time ago. When we're dealing with these lessons in the Peaceful Solution, let me tell you what some very experienced teachers think about this. There's a teacher that was in the, I think it was in Little Rock. It's been so long ago, but they were so, you could see it in their face, man. They were just looking at, we were teaching, and they were just looking, and they were just kind of like in awe, not necessarily of the teachers or how we looked or how we're dressed or anything like that. It wasn't that. They were just really, you could see them shaking their head. They'd agree with different points and stuff like that. And they came up afterwards, and they talked to some of the other teachers too, but I remember this thing. It said, what mind came up with this? what kind of mind came up with this program? Every lesson is crafted perfectly. You get that? That's what teachers think. It's just amazing, you know, because there's so many teachers that have told us so many positive things about the program. And then, of course, every now and then you get somebody out there that's rolling their eyes and so forth, like we just talked about, because they don't agree with, you know, one of the aspects or something, just like there's a lot of people out there that roll their eyes and just, you know, turn around and make little jokes and stuff, because they don't believe that respect is something that needs to be given to everybody. They think you have to, you know, get respect to get it, or that the other person has to give it to you before you give it to them and so forth. That's what they think. And so, you know, that's what they've been taught. And it takes a little bit of work in getting them out of that. But it's amazing how many teachers really think that. What kind of mind came up with this program? Because every lesson is crafted perfectly. All right. Well, so getting back to chewing on this, that's right. Every action begins with a thought. And remember, those thoughts usually come after a trigger of some type. But every action begins with a thought, sometimes even thoughts that you're not aware of. Your mind, you know, it really races sometimes and really gets going real fast. Your mind is a powerful tool in shaping and developing your character. And remember, we talked about that developing and everything, and shaping is, you know, developing is building it and everything, and layer upon layer upon layer. And the shaping of it is what we're doing with each and every lesson. Yes, you're developing that positive moral character, but we're also shaping it into this mold. You know, we're using a mold and putting it in there, and hopefully you'll conform to that mold. So what you think about, whether positive or negative. So again, positive attitude, negative attitude, pessimistic, optimistic, all these things, what you think about, whether positive or negative, will affect what you believe. It'll affect your value system. It'll affect your values, and ultimately how you behave. It'll come out. And, you know, if you've ever been around someone that's extremely pessimistic, man, it just seems like they suck the energy out of you sometimes. You know, they could come up and start talking about something that would normally sound like a joyful thing, but coming out of their mouth, being pessimistic and having a negative attitude, it's kind of like you're there and just kind of, you know, wondering, when is this going to stop? You know? But in order to become a responsible person, I see some of you smiling out there. It might be that sometimes when I'm talking, you might think that too, that when is this going to stop? You know? But in order to become a responsible person with positive character, you must become aware of how your thoughts affect your actions. And that's the big thing, is that critical thinking that helps you look at these things and what choices to make. You have to be aware of how those thoughts affect you. You can't be sitting there thinking something bad about somebody and having a negative attitude about them, or that you heard something about them and, you know, some kind of rumor, you don't even know if it's true, or that you saw something that you think is something bad about that person, but you don't have anything really to go by other than you saw something and built some kind of thing in your mind or something, you know. These thoughts will affect your actions. It'll affect how you deal with that person. It'll affect how you talk about that person to other people, you know. That's where negative talk comes in, and rumors start, and this type of thing. You know, don't jump to conclusions. Verify things. Get the truth of the matter, you know. But in order to become that responsible person and be aware of how your thoughts affect your actions, then you must be willing to practice. Get that? I got the practice part circled. Practice. You got to practice self-control. Just like if you were a baseball player, you'd have to practice playing baseball. If you were a carpenter, you'd have to practice making right cuts. You'd have to practice looking at that tape measure and practice marking pieces of wood or whatever to get it right. You would have to practice. You know, you don't go into a welding school and they tell you about how to weld and show you and let you try it one time and say, okay, A number 1 master craftsman welder, you're on the way, buddy. You have to practice, 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 practice before you get that right bead, before you don't burn through whatever it is you're welding, before you don't just make a jumbled, nasty, ugly-looking mess out of it, you know. You have to practice those things in anything you do. So why is this any different? It's not. You have to practice it. And with each time you practice it, and each time you practice it properly and have a positive thing occur, it builds, it develops, you know. But you must be willing to practice self-control to stop the negative thoughts before they turn into negative actions, which can lead to negative consequences. So here's the thing. It's hard to do, man. It is hard to do. If you've heard something negative about somebody, especially if it comes from somebody with some type of authority over you, maybe a boss, maybe someone you really have a lot of, let me say, honor for, and that you just think, wow, man, that guy's so great at what he does. I'd listen to anything he says. And then he says something bad about somebody. Well, number one clue is that he's telling you something bad about somebody just to talk bad about them. You know, now if they're a supervisor and they tell you, hey, you need to watch Billy Bob over here because he's got that welder in his hand again and he really doesn't know how to use it that well. We need to show him a little bit better, you know. So see if you can help him out. Okay, well, that's positive. That's encouraging. That's asking for your help and everything. But if it's negative and they just burn the guy, you know, well, you've got that in your mind. And it's hard to get that out if someone in authority has said something like that to you because it's said with authority, you know. And that gets into your mind about that person, and every time you look at him, you know, it's kind of like, oh, that guy does that. You know, and you think about it, you know. So be careful about those thoughts. Block those negative thoughts out of your mind. And in that particular situation, if that person likes to talk bad about people, even though they're in authority, think about how they must talk about you when you leave the room. Because they really, most of the time, when I run into people like that, they really don't care who they're talking about. It becomes kind of a habit, you know. So, anyways, keep that in mind when you're dealing with people and when you're dealing with these thoughts. You got to stop these negative thoughts before they turn into negative actions and you go out talking bad about the guy just because that person that you respect or have honor for or whatever, or whoever, maybe someone you don't even like said it, but it's still in your mind and you start passing it on. The negative consequences are, you know, all that stuff does come back around. I mean, you know, it affects you individually too. It's kind of like the person that has a grudge against somebody and they're just, every time they see him, they just hate him. They just want to do something. They talk about him to everybody that they see and everything. The only person that's affecting, it's not really probably affecting the other person much, you know, depending on what others do around him and everything too. But it sure is affecting you if you're the one, because it's just like taking a glass of poison and drinking it and waiting for the other person to die, you know. I mean, really. It affects you. You're the one that's got the poison, not the person you're talking about, you know. Think about those things. So have you ever thought about how your mind works and why you make the choices you make? This is an exciting part to me, and this is not the only time it talks about this. And I don't think we're going to get through with the next page by any possible way, but we might get into it a little bit. And I think all the teachers find this to be pretty exciting. Thinking about how your mind works. I mean, really, why you make the choices you make. Anyway, it says, if you have, then welcome to the club. How the brain functions, why we think and behave the way we do, are questions that have baffled humankind for thousands of years, okay? So it is kind of baffling. But there are some basics that we can know about how the mind works and how we come up with those thoughts and how we come up with those feelings and all this, you know. It's really interesting. And I mean, can any of you remember, and let me see your hands on this one, can any of you remember when you were like 15 or 16 years old, teenager? Feel free to show your hands for a minute. I'm not going to ask you anything embarrassing. I'd just like to know that. Any of you remember when you were a teenager? Let me just put it that way. Anything at all that occurred in your life when you were a teenager, do you remember it? Anything? Come on. Yes, okay, yes, everybody does, right? So I want to ask you something. Since you said yes, there has to be that something that you remember. What is it? Don't tell me. I don't want to know. I just want you to think about it for a minute and remember what it is and just think. Do you remember what you were wearing? Do you remember what someone else was wearing? Do you remember any of the smells that were taking place? Any cooking going on? Any gasoline being pumped? Anything with a strong smell that you would definitely remember in that situation you're remembering right now? Well, how do you remember all that? Did you think about it a couple of weeks ago and say, I'm going to think about that thing when I was a teenager, so because he's probably going to ask me about it, and I want to think about that and get prepared in advance here on what I'm going to remember. No, you don't get to choose what you remember about it. You just remember, right? Well, where does that come from? Where in the world did that come from? Well, it's way down in there in the file cabinets in your mind, okay, and in your heart. And in your subconscious mind, it's way down there, okay? And more science has learned that your memory is not only in your brain, but it's also in your heart, it's in your gut. I mean, you can read about it. I mean, you might think I'm coming up with something crazy, but you can go look it up, get out of class and go get on Google and check it out. You're going to find out some things. Every cell of your body has memory. It's DNA. Every cell of your body remembers things. And so that's what's really kind of exciting about this whole thing. Have you ever thought about how that mind works and the choices you make and how the brain functions? Well, okay. So the mind, it's divided into two parts, the conscious, and the subconscious. The conscious mind is your reasoning mind. I ask you, what's 2 plus 2? Well, your reasoning mind says, it's 4. You learned that. You know it. I ask you, what would you do, or what am I touching right now? Well, you can't see that on the screen. Let's see. What am I touching right now? If I ask you what I'm touching right now, your reasoning mind says, looks like that might be a coat he's touching right there. It's not his shirt. It's not his tie. It must be a coat. What am I touching now? Glasses. You know that. Your mind's reasoning this out. What if I say, what do you think will occur if I take my glasses off and I stomp them on the ground? Well, your mind right now is figuring out that, if he stomps them on the ground, number one, it could break. Number two, he might get some glass or something in his foot. Or number three, you might be coming up with whole different ideas. Your mind is wandering now, reasoning what might occur if I stomp on the glasses. I won't be able to see. I'll leave a mess on the floor. What other things can you come up with? That's your reasoning mind. You haven't seen me step on my glasses, so your subconscious really doesn't know what's going to occur with my glasses, does it? All right. Not to say you might not be pulling some things from your subconscious because of the glasses you stepped on it sometime or another. Who knows? But that's what's interesting about it. The mind is divided into two parts, the conscious and the subconscious. Conscious mind is the reasoning mind. It enables you to make choices and decisions. You choose. So out of all the influences that come your way, the question asked or the thing you want to do and all the influences and peer pressure and past experiences and everything else comes into play, and then boom, you got to choose. Am I going to do it this way or am I going to do it that way? That's your conscious mind doing that reasoning right there. Now, prior to that, though, the conscious and subconscious are working together here. What you think with your conscious mind and what you experience and everything feeds into your subconscious mind. Got that? What you think with your conscious mind, I think there was, I can't even remember who said it, maybe Henry, was it Thoreau? Maybe it was Thoreau that said it, maybe it was Abraham Lincoln, I don't know, one of those guys. But, and I believe that if I looked hard enough, there's another book that says something very, very close to it too. But as a man thinks, that's the way he will be, right? So it probably came first, and I remember reading the Bible, and it stated something like that. I'm probably messing it up a little bit. But I remember that in there, and then I remember reading it from some other sources and everything too, and it all kind of matches. But what you think is what you will become. The way you think about yourself is what you're going to be. The way that's important to remember, because what you think with your conscious mind feeds into the subconscious. What you see, what you hear, what you watch, what you do, and everything feeds in there, whether positive or negative. All right? Got it? So what you think with your conscious mind feeds into your subconscious mind, whether positive or negative. And right here, if you could look at the overhead for just a minute right there, boom, right there, you can see conscious mind, subconscious mind, and it's just a big circle. It keeps going in and out, okay? So kind of remember that. I know some of you don't have a book probably, or of course I did fail to mention you can download that for those of you that are on the internet. You can download the book that we're looking at right now and any of the other books we've already been through. All right. So briefly, we'll just start by reading a couple of the first couple lines on the next page, page 26. But remember, we are now studying the hidden pages, okay? Number 25, 26, and 27. When you look at the lesson plan, they're not listed, but man, are these some important pages? They really, really are. This is like, to me, the most exciting part of the book, really, right there, because it's talking about the mind and how it works. All right. So the subconscious mind, this is top of page 26. And I'm sorry if I got a little excited and the rest of you are probably sitting there thinking, what's wrong with that guy? But the subconscious mind often functions automatically. Automatically, just like it did when I said, do you remember anything about when you were a teenager? You didn't go start filing through it and thinking, well, I'm going to remember this certain thing, It just popped into your head. It worked automatically. Something popped up there. So the subconscious mind often functions automatically, and this means that you do not have to do anything for your subconscious mind to work. It functions simply because you are alive. Your heartbeat, your breathing, those are two of the functions that are controlled by your subconscious mind. If you had to consciously remember to breathe, you would probably forget, just like you forget, or where, I don't know if you forget or not, but I do sometimes, but just like you forgot where you left your books or your keys or, any number of other things that might have been forgotten, your flashlight, your wallet, all that, So if you had to consciously remember to breathe, you'd forget, If you had to consciously remember to move your left eye over, you can make your left eye move over that way. You can cause it to look over that way, but if you don't always choose where you're looking. Sometimes you just look and it's there and you see something and it catches your eye for a minute, or you see someone you know. I see several people I know out here and occasionally I look at them when we're talking, So one was shaking his head no just then and one's waving right now. So see, I know they see it too. But anyway, it's about time to stop, and I really enjoy this section right here. I really kind of envy Chris a little bit on him being able to do the rest of this right here, and probably go over some of the things I've already said too. We usually do. So it wouldn't hurt for you to read this section yourself and kind of have it in your subconscious mind for when the next class comes about. All right, so I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight, whether you're online or whether you're here at the headquarters. Appreciate your consideration and your patience with me. And the next class again is on December 24th at 5:30 p.m. Chris should be teaching it, and so look forward to that. And thank you. Put it on.